putty.
Right.
Okay. And now we can just use any old sand.
Any old
doesn't
sand,
matter, right?
Right, exactly. And that's basically what another issue is, that most people just go to a sand yard and they pick up the sand and they mix it with the putty. Now you have a great line putty.
Yep.
You're not going to get good results unless you have a quality sand as well. So what are the quality of sand?
Yeah.
The sand should be, ideally, for the best results, you should have a sharp sand. So that is a pit sand, not a river or beach sand, which is more round in particle shape.
Okay.
So a pit sand is more granular, like, you know, with lots of angles.
Okay.
A beach sand or a river sand is rounded, and it's less. It's not as good for building,
for binding.
Construction.
Makes sense.
You know, maybe plasters.
Okay.
Fine plasters might be better that way, but for construction or bedding mortar or pointing mortar for exterior work, you want to have a nice sharp sand. But you want to make sure that the sand has certain properties, like particle size distribution. If a sand lacks a certain size particle in its hole, it's a missing link in the strength of the mortar. Okay. So you want to have a good particle size distribution. Okay. You want fine, mediums, and coarse particles.
All in the same sand.
All in the same sand.
Okay.
So that varies from yard to yard. So for example, the yard that I usually go to, the sand usually sold as a mason sand and concrete sand. A mason sand is a fine sand, and the concrete sand is a coarse sand. Typically, they used coarse sand. Even with fine joints, you can see that the traditional sand is rather big. You never see very, very fine sand in buildings. So actually, you do see here in your pointing mortar, not in the bedding mortar, but in the pointing mortar, you see very, very fine sand. Of course, you have very fine joints here, so that might make sense. So, for example, at the yard near my house, I can get a nice coarse sand, which I tested and I like. And this one has pretty large particles. You can see some pretty gravelly.
Yeah, so that's the concrete sand.
That's the concrete sand.
Yeah.
And this is the mason sand, which is finer, but it's still granular.
You see some rocks in there,
you can see some rocks in there.
Yep.
So these are the two kinds of sand. I like the coarse sand because of the particle. I've tested the particle size distribution, so I like the coarse sand. So I get the coarse sand and then I sift it through a variety of sifters. Okay. Like this is 2.5 millimeters.
Yeah.
This is 1 millimeter, and anything in between. So you will get your sand.
So you make sure you have fine, medium, and coarse sand.
Right, and then you sift it to your need. Like for example, here, a 2 millimeter sand is perfect for the joint size. So you wouldn't want any of these large particles in there. So you'll put it through your sifter.
Cool.
You know, if you had any even finer joints, you might go even finer.
Amazing.
So I have a number of sifters for all needs.
Okay.
I went to another yard the other day to get some sand because I ran out, and I got very disappointed because their fine sand, it's so fine.
Wow.
That this is actually non-ASTM standard. This is like beyond standard. They shouldn't be selling this sand. It's really no good.
It's dust.
It's dust. So this is probably rounded too. So that's a beach sand. So that's just way too fine for any kind of work. Their concrete sand is the same as the fine sand.
That's fine.
So their coarse sand is...
So have they over sifting?
Well, it depends on who manufactures the sand, who pours the sand, and wherever it is. Okay. So you want to make sure you get a sand that's good. The way to do that is to use when I find when I need a new source of sand, I will get a sample and I'll put it through a simple sieve set, and this has all the different sizes sieves, so I can actually make a graph and see what the sand looks like. Okay. Once you found a source of sand that is good, then you don't need to
stick with it.
To test it every time. You know that it's coming from the same place, so you know that it's the same thing. So now,
Okay.
in order to have a good mix with the putty has enough water in it, so you don't need to add water, as long as the sand is moist but not wet
Okay.
or not dry. So,
Yeah.
you know, if it rains today and you go get sand tomorrow, chances
still be
are it
wet.
might be way too wet.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, if it stays out in the sun,
For a long time,
and
it's too
that's
dry.
just too dry. This will draw all the moisture out of the putty, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's just not going to work. So the way to test for moisture is you pick up, you know, a handful of sand, and you squeeze it together, and it should barely
See the
hold this
fingerprints.
shape
Yep.
like that. It'll break down like that. But
Yep.
that's an ideal type of
Okay.
moisture.
So that's moist but not wet right there.
Moist, but,
That's what
but
you
not
want.
wet. This sand here appears to hold a lot of water in it, so you can see how
Wow,
it
it's
stays.
a sandcastle.
That's
yeah.
right. So
beach
it
sand.
actually get moisture in my hands,
Uh-huh.
and this has been in my shop for about 2 weeks. So,
Wow. It's
you know, it
really
must have
soaking
been
it up.
really soaked. So,
Okay.
you know, when I went to do this job, I couldn't do it because I couldn't find any good local sand. I had to go back home
Oh my God.
to get some sand.
To Italy?
No. So- okay, so sand is extremely important. It's 2/3. It's most of the line putty
Yeah.
in volume. So
2/3, you say? So it's
Yeah.
about a 1-to-3 ratio.
it's a 1-to-3 ratio. Yes.
Okay.
Right. That's
All right.
ideal.
All right.
If you were going with a very, very fine sand and round sand like this,
Yep.
then the ratio would change because the particle, the space between the particles would be different.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine, you know, gravel all pushed together, the particles in between
Yeah.
would be a lot less than if you had a whole bunch of marbles together. There
Yeah.
would be a lot more room between those marbles. So the ratios change.
Okay.
So if I were to use this sand for a particular job,
Yep.
I would mix it about 1-to-2 or 1-to-2.5.
Okay.
Versus with this, I can go 1-to-3.
Okay.
And you know,
Got it.
and
Got it.
you could even go 1-to-4, and they'll still will work. But you know,
Okay.
you don't, so basically, what you want to have is the putty is the glue. So you want to have every every particle of sand coated with a little bit of putty.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to fill all the voids, and then a little more just to, you know, glue everything together.
Okay. Makes sense. So in general, you want to start with about a 3-to-1, but ultimately you need to tweak it depending on the moisture in the sand.
Right, and when you have a good expertise, you actually, when you mix a batch, you can actually tell the ratio, if it's a little too lean or if it's a little too fat. You can
Okay.
actually establish that the grain of the sand are a different shape just because you're getting a different
It
mix.
sticks out.
But that's if you use it all the time, then you'll be able to detect that.
All right.
If you haven't done it before, you
Yeah.
wouldn't know what to look
Understood.
for. Yeah.
All right. So we also mentioned.
Oh wait, and
Oh,
then
sorry.
then the
Yeah.
sand has to be clean.
Oh, geez, no
I'm
problem.
sorry. There's a lot of sands that are not washed well. So what you want to do is you want to take some
What's
sand.
the problem with it not being washed well?
Well, it would have sediments like clay.
Oh.
The clay is it's detrimental to the mortar. So it would make the mortar weaker because it's clay and it's water soluble. So it's not good for a mix. So when you get your sand, you know, you can always put it in a jar like that and
how dirty the
shake
sand
it
is.
around and
Yeah.
let it settle. And you can actually see here all the coarse sand. Then you can see the fine sand, which is
Wow.
dark.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then you
yeah.
see the yellow
It
layer
settles.
there.
Uh-huh.
That's
Silt.
silt.
Yeah.
So silt is fines are fine, but silt is no good. So the more of that clay that's in the sand,
Yeah.
the worse of a mix you're going to get.
Okay.
You know, less durable. So I mean, this is, I would say, like maybe 2% or
It's not- doesn't
1%.
look bad, yeah.
So that's okay. But if you had any more than that,
Okay.
you might want to look for a different
And
source.
again, you're doing this the first time you go to a new quarry to check it out.
right.
how
And once
dirty
you
is it.
know, then you know that that sand is
Okay.
good.
All right.
Then there's
So you had said that there's different colors.
right. So now you have your Lampadi and sand. That's your basic mix, and your ratios and whatnot.
But if we left it like that, it's the bright white mortar that
It
you
would
were
be
talking
the
about.
bright white mortar.
And we don't want that on this job.
Right. So the homeowner is pointing towards that mortar that we found on the pointing, which is a little bit of a yellow. So, you know, through my jobs, I've developed, you know, a number of. I have a lot more than these, but you know, I try different mixes and then I save them, so I know my ratios. So all I have to do is go, you know, next to a building and put one of these next to the joints or the stucco or what have you, and actually match it and already know what kind of mix.
What materials are you using to color?
So,
and when do you add it to the mortar?
well, you add it. It doesn't matter when you're mixing it. Yeah. Yeah. So, for example, you know, the Romans made an extremely durable mortar, and that's because they discovered the benefits of adding pozzolana to the mortar. Pozzolana is a word that comes from a town of Pozzuoli, which is next to a volcano. So this volcanic sand, this volcanic ashes, react with the lime to form a much more durable cement that it can even set underwater. Lime putty cures by reabsorbing the carbon dioxide that's been driven out from burning, so it's called also an air lime. It only cures when it's exposed to the air. So if you put it underwater, just like you store it with water on top, nothing will ever happen. It'll just stay wet. So
it'll actually get better.
Yeah, but it's not going to set, so you can't build underwater with it. So. Or underground where there's no carbon dioxide to be absorbed. So if you were doing some foundation work or you know, bridge work or piers or whatnot, you would need to add a pozzolana to it. Now there are natural pozzolanas and there are man-made pozzolanas. Natural pozzolanas could be, they're varied. It could be a pumice, which is a volcanic ash. Like for example, this is a pumice, which is you know, of a tan color. Diatomaceous earth, which is the shell of diatoms that settles at the bottom of lakes. You could have zeolite, which is another mineral which gets ground down and it has pozzolanic activity. Or this is another pozzolana which is white. So, you know, of course this is going to affect the color of your mortar. So you have a variety of choices of different colors that you can actually use to tint your mortar to whatever color you want. So obviously, if you want a yellowish mortar, you wouldn't be using a man-made brick dust. So that's a red brick dust. This is a soft fire brick, which is it's purpose-made for restoration work. It's a soft fire brick, just like the antique bricks at the time, and it's ground to whatever thickness powder, you want. This is about 1 millimeter. This one here, it's about
That's a
half a millimeter.
Wow,
it's much finer. It's a little more orange.
Okay.
There's that yellow brick dust.
So you have brick
right
test,
here.
different kinds of sand,
Right. So
a pumice. Yeah.
Right. So a pumice, and they're different colors. So you have for man-made, you have the yellow and the red brick dust.
Okay.
And I also have, so this is a bright yellow one.
Yeah.
This one is sourced from antique yellow bricks.
Okay.
So it's a little more of an ochre color.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So you can use this to add to your mortar. To ideally, you mix a certain amount to it to get the best results. But you can add to it. There's no harm in adding to it to do any kind of work of this type, just to tint the mortar your color.
But
so
you had told me it's not a good thing to use wood ash.
Wood ash, no, because it would make the mortar more susceptible to frost damage.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you wanted to get a gray color on your mortar, rather than using wood ash, which is actually kind of light gray, you would have to add a lot to it, and then you would really mess your mortar up. You can use a hardwood charcoal.
Okay.
Obviously, you don't want to get the briquettes. You want to get the real hardwood charcoal.
Yeah.
And and ground it down to a powder.
Okay.
and
Wow.
and add that to the mortar, and that's very effective.
Okay.
You don't have to add too much to
can
get
imagine.
your gray color,
Yeah.
and that way you don't affect.
Oversaturate it. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So if for example, when you use these are called inerts because they don't
Inerts.
do
They're
right.
done.
They don't do anything
Okay.
beneficial.
Okay.
But if you add too many
Yeah.
inerts, just like the clay silt,
Yeah. You
then
nullify.
you start affecting the quality
Yeah.
of the mortar. So
Okay.
when you add this or pigments
Yeah.
or whatnot, you always want to stay to a maximum of 5%.
Okay.
Anything any more
Just a
than
little bit.
more than that,
Yeah.
you will start affecting the quality of the mortar.
All right. So Chuck had just given you a couple of samples that might fit his.
Right. So
Style.
when we're looking at that mortar that's original,
Yeah.
we have the batted mortar that's
Yeah.
actually.
So that
I mean,
would've
this
been
is a bright white mortar.
brand
This is
new.
probably what it was when. Wait,
originally.
that's.
Yeah. First put in. Day
Yes,
one.
and you can see that it's
How
pretty
white
close.
That is. Yeah.
So that's right.
Russell. Put it up against-
That's the yellow one.
Yeah, I think this is
Right.
fine.
Right. Well, this is the pointing mortar
Yeah.
right here. So the pointing mortar is pretty close to my yellow mix.
Uh-huh.
And this is 1 putty, 1 brick dust, and 3 sand.
Mm-hmm.
So that goes since that's a reactive with the putty. It's not an aggregate, so you don't count that as an aggregate.
Okay.
So it would be a 1-2-3 mix plus your pozzolana.
Okay.
So this is a 1-to-1. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 1 part of brick dust to our mix to achieve this color, and which is what the homeowner has chosen.
Great.
Good.